Hello, and welcome to this latest episode of Living with and Beyond Cancer. My name's Steve Poynton of Steve Poynton Counselling and Support. This is a podcast for people who have or have had cancer. As a twice diagnosed kidney cancer patient who's been in remission for 7.5 years, I recognise the trials and tribulations of what happens next once we finish treatment or are on long term maintenance treatment and trying to rebuild our lives. Welcome to this latest episode where we'll be exploring the story of an inspirational lady. And this is a story I know that will leave lots of you wondering how by the end of it. Before we get on to this episode, if you want to know more about myself and why I'm doing this podcast, please go back to episode 1, which was released on World Cancer Day on the 4th of February 2026. Today, I'm joined by somebody who I've got to know over the last few years quite well, and we have our annual catch-up when our football teams play each other. Somebody who's quite a story to tell. So why don't we say hello to Sarah Briggs? Welcome, Sarah, and thank you for being with us today.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
So, yeah, I'm all good, thank you. All good. Before we get going, though, I just want to clarify that Sarah is here today in a personal capacity, and all her views are of her own. So, Sarah, why don't you set the scene for us and take us back to the beginning, if that feels okay? So, life before all of this kicked off.
I'm a teacher. I work full time. Been a teacher for a long time. Not really had suffered with very many health issues at all. I'd sort of noticed that I was feeling quite tired, but just put it down to like any teacher that's just end of termness. I'd sort of noticed that I was falling asleep quite a lot, I suppose, but felt generally okay. But not really noticed anything before I was diagnosed at all. Life was just pretty normal.
What was your sort of setup in life then? You say you were a teacher, home life, sort of family life. What was set up for you?
I'm married to my wife, Helen. We sort of met in 2010. I had a really great life, really revolving around football, holidays, making the most of life when I'm not at work. Work hard, play hard, I think is my motto.
Mhm. Okay. So I think this was just a normal day, wasn't it? When this all sort of came to light?
Yes, I don't think really many people's stories start like this. I'd started work at a new school about 3 weeks before. We were going on a school trip to Beamish, which is, for people who don't know, is an outdoor museum sort of in the northeast near Durham. I'd had some pain in my leg, perhaps for a few weeks. I'd put it down to doing some work in the gym that I'd tweaked something. The pain was pretty bad, but as I say, I just thought, "Oh, I've tweaked my knee, I've done something," it caused me a few sleepless nights but I didn't think anything extraordinary was gonna happen on this particular day. My day started in a very strange way. We went down the mine, and we were right at the back of the mine when my cancer incident, I suppose, started. I had a helmet on, and I bumped the front of my helmet on the ceiling of the mine, and sort of like I felt like my legs went out from under me, and I remember just sort of sitting on the floor, and I sort of said to my teaching assistant, "I don't think I can get up." So she sort of said, "Oh, what's the matter? Like, have you hurt yourself?" And I was like, "Oh, this feels like my legs got a bit wobbly. Like I just can't get up." So, by this point, we've evacuated a group of children from the bottom of this mine. I'm still sitting on the floor of the mine in among like the old railway tracks sitting on the gravel. So they had to bring me a vac chair, and the kids are all standing at the entrance to the mine going, "Oh, Missy, you all right?" And I'm like saying, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm fine, I think I've just hurt my knee." And I'm in this evac chair, and they take me to sort of like the staff building and get the first aider to have a look at me, and I sort of said, "Oh, like, it does hurt," but I said, "It just seems to be something, like, not right with my leg, like, I don't seem to be able to support it, it feels all wibbly, it feels a bit odd." So they called an ambulance. The ambulance was sort of taking quite a while to come. It was gonna be about an hour, and I'm sort of still sitting in this staff room chatting away to everybody, and occasionally, like, I would see, like, a group of our children go by, and I'd sort of give them a little wave and they'd sort of say, "You okay, miss?" "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay." And I wasn't in too much pain, like, it didn't feel at the time like it hurt very much. And anyway, one of the members of staff had found, like, an ambulance driver in training just outside the gates of Beamish who came in and sort of had a look at me and sort of said, "Oh, like, I think you've broken your leg." I was like, "Cool, okay." So he put me in the back of his ambulance, which was just outside the gates because he was doing some sort of training nearby while we waited for the other ambulance to come, because they felt like they didn't want to move me while they didn't really know, like, what I'd done. And I certainly had no idea at this point. At this point, I'm sort of called, one of the teachers came to see me and sort of said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna, they think I've broken my leg. I'll have a pot put on and then I'll be back with you by the, like, by the end of the day. Like, I'll be coming back to Hull with you, but with a pot on my leg," like, laughing about it. So anyway, this ambulance driver in training said, like, "I think you've done something quite bad to your leg. I'm gonna, I'm gonna put it, like, in traction." I didn't have a Scooby Doo, like, what that meant, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, fine," and he started sort of trying to, like, cut away, like, at my trousers and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, no, 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 I don't wanna do any of that." And I'd been in New York sort of a couple of weeks before that and had my New York Yankees hoodie on. I'm a big baseball fan. I was like saying, "No, no, you're not cutting that." Like, and I'm, like, whipping it off, and, like, it was quite funny at the time, and anyway, when he put my leg in traction, the pain was insane. I felt my body almost hit the top of the ambulance. I really knew I was in pain then. And then, so this point, they've got some morphine to me that they've, like, motorbiked over, I think, from the hospital because I'd been on sort of some gas and air, so I probably wasn't making any sense at this point. But I was in a ton of pain now, so I was really grateful for some morphine. And then another ambulance arrived, and they got me in the back of that, and then I was blue lighted to the university hospital in Durham. By this point, I was probably a bit out of it. Remember a kind of casualty type scene with, like, the light sort of, like, going over me while I'm laying back on a trolley and talking to a doctor. And the doctor's sort of saying to me, "Okay, talk me through, like, what's happened." And so I'm sort of saying to him, "Oh, like, I just stubbed my foot and my leg sort of, like, went, and, that's it really. Like, I didn't really do anything else." And he's, like, saying, "Oh, well, like, like, did you fall really awkwardly?" And I was like, "No, I just sat down. I just sat down on the floor." And he's, like, saying, "Oh, like, I'm gonna do some X-rays and stuff like that." And it came, like, I don't know if I was, like, just out of it by this point. I was probably very morphine driven by now, but he sort of came back to me and he sort of said, "Your X-rays are a bit odd. Like, do you have any issues with your burns and things?" So I said, "None, nothing at all, no problems with burns." Well, he said, "I do see fractures like this," but he said it tends to be where people have either been in a high-speed car crash, and he said, like, 140 miles an hour, or maybe a motorbike crash, like at 100 mile an hour plus. This doesn't normally happen. And I had no sense of this, like, whatsoever, so I was sort of like, "Well, I don't know, I just stubbed my foot, and then it just happened." So they sort of said, "Oh, well, we're gonna put you in for surgery tomorrow. You need femoral nail surgery, you've broken your femur." Again, like, I didn't
So
have a clue at this point.
so I was just gonna say that. So at this point, it's all about the leg. It's all about what on earth has happened to my leg, how I've done this, not a
Yeah.
thought of anything else other than that whatsoever.
No, no, I just thought, "Oh, I've broke my leg." Like, like, I didn't realise, like, it was really uncommon to break your femur. Again, at this point, I was still expecting to have a pot put on and I'd be back at Beamish by the end of the day, like, I had no clue, like, that it was actually quite serious, and, that they were blue lighting me because, like, they were quite concerned that, like, the fracture that I'd done, like, I could have bled to death. Like, I had absolutely no idea. Yeah, nothing. Like,
So the day after surgery, you had some surgery.
yes. I'd spoken to Helen this point, my wife, because she wanted to come, and I said, "Well, I'm gonna have this surgery tomorrow." So I said, "There's not really any point you coming tomorrow because I'm gonna be in surgery by the sounds of it, like, most of the day." So we'd made this agreement that she would come up, like, the day after. So like got the next morning, I'd met with the anaesthetist, I'd been through everything. The surgeon came back to me and he said, "I'm not very happy to go ahead like with the surgery." So I sort of said, "Oh," I'm like, "Why?" And he said, "Well," he said, "the story doesn't really fit." He said, "Legs don't just sort of snap like when you stub your foot." He said, "I'm not really sort of very satisfied with like why it's happened." Um, okay. And he sort of said, "Oh, well, we're gonna do some tests." So I said, "Oh, that's okay." And he said, "Well," he said, "there is a small percentage chance that it could be cancer." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But he said, at this point, it could be other things, but he said there is a small chance that it could be cancer. So I was like, "Oh,
So what's
okay,
going
yeah."
through your mind at this point when they've
Nothing.
stopped your surgery and saying it might be cancer? Still don't
Absolutely
believe it?
nothing. No, 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 didn't occur to me at all. So I rang Helen and I said, like, they won't let me have the surgery. They said, "It's a small chance it could be cancer." Well, and I was like, "I'm sure it's something else." Like any 45-year-old woman, perhaps my burns are just a bit not very, they're not very good. Maybe I just got weak burns. Never thought I'd never been in hospital. I'd had no idea about anything about health things. So at this point, I was just clueless. So I had all these scans, and but every time it was it was a difficult day because every time they moved me, obviously my legs in traction. Every time they moved me, I'm on one of these boards, and it takes a team of people to move me because I'm completely bedbound. Can't move at all, and I was in a shed ton of pain every time they moved me. Like, just didn't want them to come anywhere near me. So I had to like go in the MRI machine, had to go in the CT scan machine, and every time they moved me, I was in absolute agony. Um, so anyway, um, the guy came to me sort of later on in the day to see me, and he's sort of I could see him now walking across the ward, like one of the orthopedic surgeons, and look, there was a sort of team of people behind him, and then a nurse sort of flustering along behind, and I was in a ward with 4 women, so they came to my bed and shut the curtains, and I thought,
It's really
"God."
interesting you described that because I was talking when I had my diagnosis. I said in episode 1, it was like a consultant comes along with what feels like a herd of elephants behind, which in
Yeah,
reality is probably about 3 or 4 resident doctors, and the woman in the blue jacket who tends to be the Macmillan cancer nurse.
yeah. Yeah, and obviously that was my scenario, but I mean, it felt like they walked towards me, and all I could hear is remember thinking he had really clicky shoes, like, and I could hear them, and there was just this sense when the curtains went round, and I just thought, "Oh no, this is not good." So he sat down, and all I could it was really weird, but all I could think was, "Oh no, like all of these other people can hear what's wrong with me." I was really embarrassed.
Mm.
Um, he said, "We've found a tumour, like, on your leg." And he just said that. He didn't sort of say it was cancer, and it wasn't until, like, he'd gone again and I was left with this nurse that she sort of explained to me that a tumour meant that I had cancer. I didn't even know. I mean, I don't know how naive I was at this point, but yeah, she had to explain to me that they'd found a cancer on my leg. And I was just, like, thinking, "Well, what's cancer doing on my leg? That's really weird." And that he was gonna do some more scans because he said that might not be the only part of it. So, I had like, the next day, I had to, like, go and have, like, some more, like, full body scans to see if they could find the cancer anywhere else.
So how are you feeling at this moment?
Oh, it was awful.
Obviously shocked,
I was on my
and that
own, yeah. Yeah, so I was on my own because I was supposed to be having this femoral nail surgery, so Helen wasn't there. I was just completely and utterly by myself. I'm not even anywhere near home where anyone can come and, like, I'm 2.5 hours away from home, and it just felt surreal. It just felt completely surreal. I was just laid in the bed thinking, and I still sort of kept my curtains shut because I didn't really want to sort of open them, and, like, I knew the 3 women knew now, like, what was wrong with me. Um, but I just didn't want
so
to
it's
open
not
the curtains and face anyone.
it's not the first time on this podcast we've heard about the way a cancer diagnosis is delivered. How do you think that could change, or what do you think should happen? Because I'm hearing straight away lack of privacy. and just impending doom when they march into your room or pull the curtain round. That's
In all fairness, like, like I didn't feel like it was really poor. It just felt, I don't know, like, I'm not really sure, like, what else they could have done. Like, I'm in a bed of, like, with, like, 4 different people, like, short of, like, wheeling me away to tell me. Maybe that they did tell me more and I just didn't hear it. Like, I'm not very good, like, I kind of shut down when things feel really overwhelmed. But, I mean, like, the nurse definitely did stay with me and talk me through things, but I think I was just probably in a state of absolute shock. Yeah. But I was kind of grateful, I think, to him, because it struck me that if they'd gone ahead with the surgery and found it then, I'd been probably in a lot more trouble than I was. Like, I was sort of grateful, I think, at that point for him, sort of saying to me, like, I'm going to get a second opinion about it and do this instead. So I sort of discovered that he had, since then, that he'd asked an orthopedic surgeon in Newcastle for his opinion about it, um, and decided to go with these scans instead of going ahead with the surgery. So the seems poor. I don't really know what other options maybe they could have had about, like, how to do it.
'cause I guess I just hear it feels a little impersonal at times, and I know you mentioned it was quite embarrassing for you, or everybody knows your business, and I
Yeah.
understand they've got the setup they've got, but I personally think at times a little bit more care could be taken how they deliver this news to people.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for somebody who, for like me, like, never been in hospital in my life, I'd no idea, like, about, like, how things were done. I knew so little about cancer. I just, as I say, I didn't even realise that having a tumour on my leg meant I had cancer initially. Um, I felt like I'd had a better talk with him, like, the next day. He came back to me and he sort of said, "I've got some more bad news." I was like, "Well, I'm kind of getting used to that now." Like, he said, "You've got another tumour on your kidney." And he said, "And we think that's where this one has come from." So again, it was difficult. Finding a second tumour. At least Helen by this point was with me. But yeah, like, but again, I didn't have any clue about what the implications of that were. That not only did I have cancer, but I had spread. I didn't know what metastasis was. Like, I didn't know what. I just didn't have any clue. I just felt really naive. Just no
So what,
knowledge.
um, so now by now you've been told you've got kidney cancer, you've got a metastasis in your leg's broken.
Yeah,
Doesn't really get much tougher than that, I guess, at this moment in time. You're in a hospital, nowhere near home.
yeah.
What's going through your mind? What's your biggest fears and concerns here? Because I'm employed, a teacher.
Yeah,
What's
just getting
going on
back to
in
work.
your
Like,
mind?
how am I gonna get back to work? Like, I don't, like, I didn't have any clue about, like, the seriousness of it, I suppose, at that point. Like, I had no clue what was ahead. It was thinking about coming to terms with it. But it's really weird, but, like, being away from home and having been alone, it helped me to come to terms with it, I think. I saw it as a positive, really, because I was able to get my head round it in a bit of a bubble. I didn't have to face anybody else and their emotions. I was just able to sort of talk about it with Helen um, but I think even I don't think we really understood what the implications were. Like, Helen, I think talked to the doctors sort of on her own a lot more than I realised. But I think it was from then it was just a case of trying to move forward, and then sort of I can remember on the 3rd day, he came back to me and they'd done some more scans by this point and said, "We haven't found any tumours anywhere else." And I could just remember saying to him, "Thanks, that's the best piece of news that I've had for days." Just kind of like, "Okay, so you've got 2 tumours, but you haven't found any more." And I saw that as a good thing. Just
So
crazy.
what sort of support were you offered away from the treatment, and what treatment was sort of planned? What were they going to do? Because obviously you've got this broken leg, operations on
Yeah.
pause. So let's go there first with the practical treatments, and then what sort of
Um
support were you offered for sort of mental health? You're going to be off work for a while, I assume. What comes around for you next?
So, I was offered a transfer to the Freeman Hospital in Newcastle, or to go and have surgery in Birmingham and be transferred there. So the Durham Hospital were linked to Newcastle, but my hospital was linked to this surgeon in Birmingham. So obviously, like, I made the decision, like, I would go to Newcastle because I didn't, like, having been moved a lot at this point. I didn't want to go through any more pain. I couldn't face hours and hours in an ambulance, um, because it was still really painful. Um, they'd got my pain under control a little bit by this point, so I had quite an exciting afternoon with the anaesthetist putting a nerve block in my leg. So he had an exciting scan machine next to my bed where he could show me putting the nerve block down my femoral artery. That was quite exciting. I enjoyed that. Yeah, so pain by now has gone down a bit, but like treatment plan is definitely first surgery to mend my leg, so transferring hospitals. And then by then they'd been in touch with Castle Hill, which is the hospital, the specialist cancer hospital in Hull, and that when I'd had one operation, the idea was that quite soon afterward I would have another operation on my kidney. Yeah, so two big surgeries coming up.
So
So
a lot
next
going
step,
on a lot going on mentally, I assume there.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, by now, like it was the pain really that was just difficult to deal with. It just felt quite overwhelming at times. It was hard, and I was completely and utterly bedbound. I couldn't move, do anything. So I had an ambulance transfer to the Freeman Hospital, and I think things got a lot better once we got to the Freeman Hospital. I was assigned a specialist nurse, Karen Foster, who I will be forever grateful for. She was really good. I was going to have a biopsy as well before the operation, so I had that I needed to prepare for. I was able to be catheterized, which was so much better because I'd had to, like obviously just toileting arrangements before that had just been not great. That wasn't, yeah. So like being catheterized in itself just felt a whole lot better than the situations that I'd been in at the other hospital. Yeah, but again, sort of like I was away from home still with a lot to face in the next few days.
Mm. So work-wise, you told them you're gonna be off for a little while?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just had to ring my boss and just say, I've only just started at working at your school. I was 3.5 weeks in and I've got cancer. And that was that. Like, and I only had a terms contract as well. It was almost like a bit of a trial. I had a, a contract until Christmas. This is September. The idea was I was going to work my term and then get another contract. So that was it, basically. I wasn't going to go back.
How did that feel? I guess uncertainty around a future.
Yeah, really uncertain. I was very lucky. I had a bit of money behind me. Um, my dad had died a few years previously, and like I had a bit of money behind me because I mean, at that point, I don't really know what I would have done without savings. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and like obviously, like Helen is sort of taking time off work, and we're sorting out hotels for her in both Durham and in Newcastle because there isn't any accommodation nearby. So yeah, it was difficult.
Really difficult. I mean, how did that affect your mental state going into surgery, or was it just a case of let's just get this done and worry about it afterwards?
Yeah, I think so. I don't ever think I thought about my mental state at all. Like, I certainly had a lot of conversations with Karen, like the specialist nurse, and Tom Beckinsale, who were my surgeon at the Freeman, explaining to me that this is like because I've got spread. It's sort of they had to explain to me about it being stage 4 cancer, that it's sort of counted as terminal. That certainly had a big effect because again, I didn't understand that that's what that was. I just understood I had cancer and I had spread. Didn't know that that's what it was called and that it was seen as terminal. So yeah, we had a big lots of big talks. I worried about that, and you can't help it. But I had nothing else to do all day. So you Google stuff, don't you, and looking at what the chances of surviving stage 4. And I was desperately looking. I think at this point that I didn't know anybody else. I'd never even heard of kidney cancer, to be honest. Um, yeah, it was hard. And understanding that desperately Googling, kidney cancer with a pathological fracture, which I'd never heard of. I didn't know that cancer could cause fractures like that or, and I can really like, one thing that really sticks out in my mind was sort of, like I Googled like a 5%, there was a 5% chance of making it to 5 years. And I remember discussing that with like Karen, my specialist nurse, and I was sort of saying to her, like, "What chance have I got of surviving this?" And she said, "Well, it's a really mixed bag. People in your situation, we treat a lot of people who've got burn or soft tissue tumours who we treat, and some of them survive and some of them don't survive very long." So that was hard, but I can remember sort of saying to her, "Well, if there's a 5% chance, then I'll have to be in that 5%." I said, "I'll have to push 19 people out of the way, and I'm gonna be one of those."
Yeah,
And that was my
determined
mindset.
attitude. Yeah, your mindset. Yeah, great.
That was
So
my
you had the
mindset. I
third.
said,
So you had the surgery to your femur, and then a
"Yeah."
few days later, I believe, or a few weeks later, to remove the tumor in your kidney.
Yes, I had the surgery to mend my femur, and then they had me out of bed. I was, like, up and sat up and moving about, like, from the off, because I'd been bedbound by this point for, 3 weeks. So when I first came round, like, from the operation, I thought I'd had a stroke. Like, I was sort of trying to move my legs and, 'cause they were sort of saying, "Oh, we're gonna get you, like, sat up today, and we're gonna sit you on the edge of the bed," and I was like, "Oh, yeah," and I sort of went to move my legs and they just literally wouldn't move. I was terrified. The physio came, and I was like, "I can't move my legs, I can't move my legs, there's something wrong with them." But I just didn't realise that my muscles had just wasted away while I've been in traction, for all that time. Um yeah, so got sat on the edge of the bed, and then the next day I could stand up on a frame, and I was allowed to weight bear from the off. And I got to the door, and then the next day I was aiming to get a little bit further and a little bit further. And then I really remember getting to the nurses' station like that, like wobbling along on my frame, just to sort of like go wandering 2 or 3 times a day because I'd been in a room on my own and I just wanted to bump into some people and talk to them because apart from Helen and nurses, I hadn't really seen anyone. So when I got to the nurses' station, I could see my name on the board, and it sort of said, "Estimated time of departure, 10th of October." And I was like, "Right, that's it, like 10th of October, like I'm gonna get home." So that was what I worked towards. So I just pushed myself, like walking further and further. And I was like saying to them, "Well, how far do I have to walk to be able to go home? What have I got to be able to do?" And because I've got to do it by the 10th of October, because it says on that board I'm going to go home on the 10th of October. And I was just desperate to go home at this point.
Mhm. Okay, so you eventually get out of the hospital in Newcastle and back to Hull.
Yeah, yeah.
How long before you had your kidney removed?
But about another 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So when I went into hospital, to have my kidney out. I was still on crutches, so I went into hospital on crutches. Um, yeah, so nephrectomy. So I had that. I think it was on a Wednesday.
So
Uh,
how do you prepare, Sarah, for a big operation, which a nephrectomy is, a removal of your kidney? It is a big operation. You're taking an organ out of
yeah,
your body ultimately. How do you
yeah.
prepare for that when you've just come out of major surgery?
I don't really like. I just think I was just in a daze. Like I'd come out of hospital and I just had a really rough time when I got home. Like even when I got home, it was rough because I felt, like almost like addicted to morphine. The first couple of days when I was home in Hull, I don't think I slept. Um, so I was just determined that I wasn't going to take very many painkillers this time because I'd had such an awful time coming off the morphine that I was just determined that I was just going to be all right and I'd have to just manage without any painkillers because there was no way I was going to go through coming off morphine again. That was
Yeah,
that's all I could think about.
yeah. Sounds like that was almost up there with the pain of the surgery, the difficulty
Yeah.
getting off that morphine.
Yeah, I rang the GP and I was like, "What's wrong with me? I just keep shaking and I can't sleep and I'm jittery and I can't concentrate." And she came out to see me at home and she sort of said, "Oh, like you're just coming off the morphine." Because obviously I'd been on morphine for 3.5 weeks, a month
Mm,
by this point. Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, I mean, if I'd had morphine, I don't know if at this point I'd still be addicted to it. If I'd had any, I'd have absolutely taken it. It was a good job I didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah,
So
nephrectomy was really hard, like, 'cause obviously I couldn't use my crutches, there was no fit state to use my crutches, so I had to use a walking frame. Um, I was provided with loads of equipment though, because obviously, like, I was fairly debilitated and I wasn't going to be able to use my crutches. So I've got two things going on. So I just felt like the physios came and I just got given like loads of equipment. Like I was really well taken care of. I had a walking frame for downstairs, a walking frame for upstairs. I had like an old lady's sort of seat on wheels that sort of like I could sit down on, and I was given so much equipment, like we couldn't, like I had a couple of friends came to pick me up, and we could hardly get it all in the taxi. But I can remember the number of steps, I've counted them since, from the Ward 15 at Castle Hill to the door where I got the taxi is like 50 steps. Honestly, it must have taken me 20 minutes to do it. Like, like with my leg, because I was determined that I had to keep up the physio on my leg because I didn't want that to drop off. I didn't want to sort of like go backwards in terms of the rehab from my leg. And then I've got this to deal with. So like all the time, all I was thinking of, I think I was just obsessed with being better. I just wanted to be better.
So I know, and a lot of people listening will know when you've had an organ removed or a tumor removed, a few weeks later, sort of 6, 8 weeks later, you have biopsy results. What
Yeah.
did those biopsies tell you?
Well, I'd had a hint of it, I think, when I was in the Freeman. They'd speculated that there was some spindle cells, and again, I didn't know what that meant at the time. But I'd been to see the oncologist quite soon after the nephrectomy, telling me, "Oh, yeah, nephrectomy went really well. We're thinking we're gonna give you, like," so you ask, don't you, like, "What's the prognosis?" They said, "Oh, we'd expect you to live for about 10 years." Yeah, like, about 10 years, and again, that was a shock even, 10 years, but I'd gone away and I was kind of like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, okay," so that's fine. Went back for the pathology, and there was this, like, Professor Maravillas, who's my oncologist, is a man of few words, but he looked really solemn. Um, and he sort of said, like, like we're only giving you, because of what we found in the pathology, like, like the numbers have changed. So I sort of said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Oh, well, if there's anything that you want to do, I'd suggest you put your house in order." So I sort of stood like, "Well, what do you mean? How long?" Um, well, 2 to 3 years with treatment, 2 years, 3 with treatment. I was like, "Well, what happened to 10 years?" That had all gone. So this was just devastating. Like, I went to Helen and I went to the spiritual room, or like quiet reflection room or whatever in the hospital, and I just remember just praying, spending time just crying and praying because it just absolutely floored me. It was awful. It's just truly awful to sort of think, well, I can't even, that's not very long. Like, I'm 45 at this point. What on earth do you do with yourself?
Words
Yeah.
don't describe. I hear words don't describe where you're at right now mentally, and the fear and the wondering of, wow, how did I get here from falling,
Yeah.
sitting down, and suddenly I'm faced with 2 years to live.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, sort of like mentally, like I just don't think it had hit me at this point. I was just in this like survival mode of like, right, okay, like, what am I gonna do? Like, okay, I've got 2 years, right? What am I gonna do with it? So, Helen got a sabbatical from work. So I'm in 2018 by this point, January 2018. Just come off my crutches, so I've been at the hospital 3 times a week doing physio, sort of pushing myself as much as I can with the recovery from the nephrectomy. But I'm now faced with actually, gonna have to hurry things up a bit now because I've got to get on with doing things. But also this sort of determination that, like a will to survive, like I really very much felt a will to survive, like I was, determined that, as I say, I was gonna be this one person out of 20, pushing 19 other people out of the way. Yeah, but getting on with it. So in, um and also at this point, Helen had broken her foot. So we had a period of time where actually both of us were on crutches at home. She'd had an operation on her foot, and so at one point, like, we were both hobbling about on crutches, which was really crazy. really crazy. So my primary carer's also on crutches. Um, so I
Wow.
just sort of thought, right, well, I'm gonna book a holiday. Gonna book a holiday. Let's go to Bruges on the ferry. So in January, I think it was 2018, I thought, right, like Helen and I hobbled about Bruges on our crutches. It was just insane. So I could hardly walk, but like
Yes.
I knew about as far from from the coach of from the ferry. I thought, well, I can walk as far as like the main square, and then I just like hobbled about, and we sat down, and then I hobbled back again.
Eh, so what happened over the next 12 months? You had a few things you wanted to tick off.
Yeah, I just had a massive bucket list. So in 2018, and again, I'm insanely lucky. Um, I I'd had a critical illness policy since I was like 22 that I'd sort of completely forgotten about. Been paying it since I was 22 when I started work, and like that paid out. Like that was £50,000, and as I say, I had a bit of money behind me, and um, I was just really lucky. So I literally went on holiday every month of 2018. Well,
Mm,
in patches, because like when I'd had this 2 years to live, I was on 3 monthly scans. So I used to live in patches of 3 months. So I'd go for a scan, I'd get my scan results, and I'd get a fit to fly for certificate on the day from my oncologist, and then I'd plan the next 3 months. So when it was like a standing joke with my friends that if I was going up for scan, if I got good scan results by tea time, I would have booked my next holiday.
mm. Coping mechanism, innit? And I get the fortune of how you were able to do that, but I guess also it tells you, and one thing we can say, can't we, to people is if you haven't been diagnosed with cancer and you don't have some kind of critical life cover, get it and
Yeah.
get it now.
Yeah, yeah, whatever it costs you. I mean, mine, I started paying it, it was £6 a month. It was only £25 a month when I was diagnosed, and it just immediately paid out. I mean, again, I was really, I was really lucky because of the diagnosis that I was only given 2 years to live, but my GP backed me to get something. Is it called a list 99 or something, Steve? I've forgotten now. But like basically, I had a piece of paper that said there was a chance that I could die in the next 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember what it's
So,
called, but there is a
yeah,
document.
something 99, yeah, there's a document that's basically, like my GP backed it, and she helped me with all the benefits. Because obviously at this point, I'm trying to navigate as well as everything else, I'm trying to navigate the benefit system of sort of thinking, like, uh, I've been used to earning, £2,000 a month as a teacher, and now I've got nothing coming in. Contract had ended at the school, and that was it. So I can remember speaking to like the benefit people, and they were sort of saying, "Oh, well, like you'll be on, employment support allowance, and that's like it's £150 a week." And I was saying, "But my bills are more than £600 a month. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, is the like, do you not like get?" I was like thinking, "This isn't my fault, and, like, how has this happened?" Like, now I'm on minus £1,400 a month to what I'm used to being on.
Mhm.
So, as well as navigating that, and I'd never claimed benefits in my life. I'd no idea, like, what to do, how to navigate it, how to apply, how to speak to people, what to say, nothing.
That benefit system is something that's really tough, isn't it? And I know the DWP have just launched thankfully and finally, after a lot of sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Persuasion, shall we say? They're doing a review into benefits for cancer patients. And I don't know if you know, you've probably seen, Sarah, that I do a bit of work with a charity called Mission Remission. And two of their key sort of focuses are on, as we talked about before, life insurance policies, critical illness, and mandating it like we all pay into a pension pot now.
Yeah,
So there's a statutory pension pot that comes out of your wages that we all pay for, and doing one where you have to have it for life insurance, and you can
yeah,
opt out if you want to. But then, if obviously if you're opting out of it, then that's your own thing. If you get to a problem further down the
yeah,
line, but also their other one is in. I don't know about your case. We haven't got to return to work yet, but I know in a lot of cases people try and return to work in between treatment. So you go through the whole process of universal credit application and any kind of benefits. As you've just said, it's a minefield and it's a nightmare. If you then go back to work, rightly, your benefits get stopped because you're earning again. But if you then start to struggle with your treatment or realize, actually, this is too much, I can't do it, then you got to start the process again. And what they're calling for is a 5-year pause. So if somebody's on benefits for cancer treatment, they go back to work, benefits stop, yes, but there's a pause. So if you end up in a relapse or re-diagnosis, you've only got to produce a piece of paper from your oncologist or whoever and say, yeah, okay, and press the button and off we go again. That would be, surely that would be an advantage from your point of view as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky, like, I had a really supportive GP, who just helped me so much because, like, she ensured that sort of like, as well as, like, the employment support allowance, that I also got PIP, as it was at the time, that she, like,
Yeah.
and, like, obviously, at the time I was assessed, like, I couldn't do anything, like, I'd just come out of hospital from a nephrectomy.
So 12 months on, lots of different holidays and things to do, ticked off the list. So now you're 12 months into 24 months. What do you think about the next year? You feeling okay? Your thoughts about returning to work, or what's the plan for the next 12 months?
Yeah, so sort of thought, "Oh, it's 2019, like, I'm still alive." I didn't really think I was supposed to be. No one ever told me that I was going to be. They pretty much seemed a mindset that it recur, like, "Oh, this one's okay, but it probably come back by the next one." Because I had sarcomatoid, um, renal cell carcinoma, and, when I looked that up, there was no treatment. There was nothing that worked. I could find one person who had the same treatment as you, the IL-2, but who'd managed full remission, but, like, most people died. Like, when I looked at the bell curve, like, the end of the bell curve was perhaps a few months.
Mm.
I'm a few months into this by now, and I just thought, "Brilliant, there's absolutely no treatment out there for me." There was nothing. Uh, I was still alive, and I thought, well, perhaps I might have to think about going back to work because 'cause I'm still alive and I wasn't expected to be. So, yeah, I was offered a contract by the head for the school that I'd worked at for 3.5 weeks. Um, I'm really fortunate that she sort of took a chance on someone with stage 4 cancer being given 2 years to live, and, she offered me a job part-time, like, going back 4 days a
Yeah.
week. So I worked, like, a Monday and a Tuesday. I had a day off on a Wednesday and a Thursday and a Friday until July, so had a 6-month contract, and yeah, so I went back to work.
So you're living short term, aren't you? You're living short term contracts at work. You're living
Yeah,
between 3 monthly scans. What were your
yeah.
scans showing? Because you said just then they were expecting deterioration through that. And I know you said there was no treatment out there, but were they doing anything with you? And what sort of, were they trying to extend things?
Well, I've started on denosumab treatment, which was sort of described to me as it would make, like, my leg a hostile environment for cancer. So I was having denosumab treatment, like, every 3 months, and I was offered an adjuvant treatment, so that could stave it off. But he sort of talked about, like, it would affect my quality of life. So I just said, "No, I don't want anything to affect my quality of life. I'm not gonna take it." It's not worth it. Like, I've only got 2 years to live. Adjuvant treatment's not really gonna help me. So I didn't so I've literally had nothing. I've had my 2 surgeries, and I've my denosumab treatment and nothing. There wasn't anything else.
So what were your scans showing?
Nothing. Gone.
No
So, like,
progression.
2
Gone. Okay.
Nothing, nothing at all. So, like, I had these 2 surgeries, one to remove the tumour and obviously mend my leg, so I've got a big metal rod in my leg, and the nephrectomy. I had 1 dose of, radiotherapy, which they sort of said this was on my leg. It was just to sort of, like, mop up anything that they might have moved around during the surgery, and that was that. I've not had anything else since, no treatment.
Well, unlike you, I'm not a school teacher, so maths isn't a great point for me, but this all started in 2017. So 2-year sort of prognosis back end of 2017, beginning 2018. We're now 2026. The maths for mine don't quite add up. What's gone on and how have you ended up where you are today?
I don't really know. Like, I think I'm just considered a bit of a medical marvel by now. My oncologist, as I say, is a man of few words, and he just says, He knows I don't like to, like, wait very long before I kind of get my scan results, so, like, before I've actually sat down, he sort of says, "The scans are clear," um, and I sort of say, "How?" And he just sort of shrugs and says, "I don't know. Don't know."
Wow.
Yeah. He, like, like, deals with a lot of complex cases, and I did say to him sort of, like, last summer, like, when I saw him, I sort of said, "I don't suppose you ever thought, like, he'd still be, like he's, like, still here 7.5 years later?" And he sort of said, "No." And I sort of said, Do you normally see people for quite this long?" And he said, "No." Yeah, like, just in, like, miracle territory now. I don't think anybody knows why I haven't had a recurrence. I've now sort of finished my denosumab treatment. I've been on it so long now that I'm, like, the longest person to have had it, like, with my prognosis. So, I'm not even on that now. Unfortunately, I've pushed the other people out the way, and I am that percent person.
Wow.
And touch wood, I haven't had any recurrences, nothing. My scans still show NED.
Well, so how do you process that? I mean, I'm going to guess that you just get on with it, having listened to you today. How do you process the fact that you were given 2 years, you've done all your bucket list, and
Yeah,
hey, I'm living my best life at the moment. I'm doing practically anything I want to. I'm working as a
yeah.
teacher, doing a job I love. Everything's going well at home. Even my football team's doing all right this year. How do you process that?
It's definitely led to some mental health issues, like, like, one thing that, like, I did spend some of my critical illness policy on, and I have done all the way along, like, through this, is, like, paid for my own counselling, because I went through terrible mental health struggles, like, like, there were times that I didn't want to discuss dying with Helen. I used counselling as a way to sort of cope, really, because I was just able to talk about things that perhaps, I couldn't discuss with Helen. I couldn't face saying them. And I feel like that's definitely helped me along the way, like, counselling. I still see my counsellor now. I don't see her as often. I was probably on weekly sessions, like, at one point, but, like, I perhaps sort of talk to her every couple of months now. But that's definitely been a really good investment. And, I know I'm really lucky that I've had the money to pay for that myself. But it's helped me process everything, because it was really difficult. Like, I really struggled when I got to the 2-year mark, and I can remember being at work and sort of standing there, and I was like, "Well, like, what am I supposed to do now? I've been on a countdown to 0. Like, what do you do, like, when you get to 0?" Like, it took me a long time to get my head around that. And
So you
like, people sort of think of it and, like, think, "Oh, you've had a really great time, you've done everything on your bucket list." And, like, it took me a long time to realise that actually holidays and doing bucket list things were just an escapism. Like, it was just a way of, like, when I
Right.
was on holiday, I was just escaping away from I didn't have cancer when I was on holiday, I was just doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I realised I was essentially just running away and having a period of time away from the cancer. I
Yeah.
could forget about it for a little while. Definitely finance-wise, it's left a big hole, because I've not really thought about money. I've just frittered money away. I've never not really considered what did I have to save for? Didn't really have to save for anything. So
Mm.
I'm left now at 54 thinking, I need to start thinking about navigating, still living every day, because I never take it for granted that I'm gonna have a clear scan, because I can't. But I've still got to sort of try and look ahead and sort of think, well, 54 to 60 when I'd like to retire is not that long. So I need to start thinking about that as well. And I've just done whatever I wanted for years. And perhaps I ought to start thinking about my health now a little bit, and not sort of living
Mm.
with a not really caring about anything for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, again, another mental shift, isn't it? Or mindset shift, should I say, rather than mental, I guess. But you and me met through a support group.
Yeah.
How has peer support helped you? Do you think that's something that I guess the system should encourage more and fund more, I guess?
Absolutely. At the beginning, I just wanted to find out one of the best things that happened is that I found people who were diagnosed in the same way that I was. That I'd been given this death wish, really, I suppose, like 2 years to live. There were other options, there were other things out there, and the other thing that really helped was a friend from teacher training college, like, his twin was also diagnosed perhaps about 6 weeks ahead of me. So I always had somebody to talk to and discuss. And again, we're in the same kidney cancer group. So it was really helpful to talk to my peers and again, ask questions about things. I used them to sort of keep up to date with treatment. So every time I go to a scan appointment, even though I'm I'm really lucky, I've never needed to discuss treatment, I would always know what treatment I was gonna go with my to my oncologist with. "I would like to have this treatment, please. You know, this is the treatment that I would like because this is really successful." So, I think sort of I'd advocate for patients being knowledgeable and sort of knowing what's out there as options and, like, I want to be offered the best option for me of, of things that work, not just what's the bog standard
Yeah.
first line treatment.
So just starting to sum up, would you say, what advice would you give to somebody who's diagnosed with cancer today? Not necessarily kidney cancer, but what comes with a cancer diagnosis that people might not realize? What struggles have been sort of the hardest to handle for you?
I think the mindset, I think some people who are diagnosed with cancer just almost like give up. Um, and I just went at it completely the other way. Like, I feel like my mindset about right from the beginning is part of the reason that I'm sitting here today. Like, it's not that, like, I was just very much like, I've got everything to live for. I've still got so much I want to do. Like, I'm going to just go at this with everything that I've got. And, and then that's hard because I know some people like would say, well, like I've done that and I'm still really ill. But there's definitely something about a belief to live and to go on that I think is really important.
Yeah, I hear what you say there, and I hear you really rightly qualify that it's not the only thing that gets you there, because otherwise people who are fighting for their lives and unfortunately don't get the results that you've had, that almost feels like they've not done something right, doesn't it? But I
Mm.
get what you mean, that attacking this gives you the best sort of chance, if you like, and yeah, I mean, we can't speak for people who aren't fortunate enough to be in that situation, but yeah, I think it does give you a fighting chance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just sort of, I just went with life of like, well, if this is like the hand that I've been dealt, like I'm just gonna make the most of it. So I just sort of saw that I was gonna have to exist for a period of time in a medical bubble, but I just told myself that there was life beyond that. Like it wasn't just gonna cancer wasn't gonna define me. And, like I would absolutely ludicrous to say it, but I have to see it as it's been a positive in my life. Like I see that having cancer has given me opportunities that I never would have had. I've said yes to things that I would never have done. But yeah, I can only see it as a positive.
It's so strange, isn't it? I hear it so often in my sort of line of work, in patient advocacy, counselling, my own situation, where you say to a cancer patient, it must be absolutely horrendous to live with that every day. And yeah, if you were said now and you hadn't got cancer, would you like a cancer diagnosis? You'd say, no, thank you very much. Thanks for the
Mm.
offer, but no. But has it changed your life for the better? Well, there's some elements that absolutely haven't, but do you know what? Yeah, it has in a way. It gives you a different outlook and
I
sort of
live for
helps
every
to put
day.
things
I
into
live every
perspective.
day as
Yeah.
if it's my last. Like I look for joy in everything. I find joy in really small things because, on the worst days when I was in my bed on my own, like up in Durham and I was in a load of pain, there wasn't a lot of joy. But you just try and find it in really small things. And as I say, it's brought me opportunities that I would never have had and taught me to live with every day in mind as well as looking at trying to look. I still find it hard to look very far ahead because I can't take it for granted still. But yeah, very much. I definitely find joy every day in something.
Well, well, thanks, Sarah. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining me today on this latest episode of Living with and Beyond Cancer. I know it's you live to tell your story. You enjoy it, don't you? I know that. But yeah, I know it can be hard as well to put your story out there in the public domain. So thank you for being so honest. Thank you for being so open. And thank you very much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure, Steve.
So, if you've enjoyed today's episode, why not listen to previous ones? The first one, as said, was released in World Cancer Day on the 4th of February. If you want to know more about my counselling service or anything else that I do, please visit my website on www.stevepoyntoncounselingsupport.co.uk, where you'll find information on my counselling services, my public speaking services, and my training service. Thanks again for joining, and we'll be back with another episode soon.